Welcome, everybody. It is 6 o'clock, and we'll get the meeting rolling. Call the meeting to order. We'd like to formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land, and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation. Welcome to the Gunshot Treaty lands of 1788. It is on these lands and on the shores of the Big Lake, the Mississauga Anishinaabeg met with the Crown to facilitate the opening of these lands for settlement. Let us be reminded of the responsibility we all have in making sure that we respect these lands and waters that give us life and sustain our livelihoods. This public meeting is being conducted in person, and members of public may attend in person or participate virtually. The meeting will be live streamed on the municipality's meeting portal and YouTube channel. The video recording will be uploaded to the Municipality of Trent Hills website following this meeting. Next item is approval of agenda. It is recommended that the agenda for the public meeting of March 5th, 2024 be received and approved. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor English, Councillor Giddings, all those in favor? And that is carried. Is there any disclosure of interest at this time? Seeing none. These public hearings and public meetings are being held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the meeting is for council members to formally hear and receive public and agency comments. The intent of these statutory public hearings and public meetings is to receive public feedback and incorporate it into recommendation reports from staff. There will be no decisions made during this meeting. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded for the purposes of the creation of a public record. Any property owner may file an application under the Planning Act relating to their property. The purpose of the public process in filing an application is to determine if the proposal is supported by local and provincial land use policies. The process also seeks public input in order to determine if any issues identified have been or can be addressed. The applicant or agent will be given an opportunity to speak on behalf of their submission and to respond to questions arising from the discussion of these applications. Interested members of the public will be given an opportunity to speak in favor or in opposition to the application being dealt with at this hearing meeting. All persons addressing council must state their full name and address and must direct their comments through the chair. Any information you provide at a public hearing, public meeting may be disclosed in a public record. I'll be watching both the online and the gallery, and if you want to speak at the gallery, if you raise your hand, and we'll have to speak at the podium and turn the microphone on so that everyone can hear. If you missed the live meeting, had technical issues, or preferred to submit comments following the public hearing, you may email your comments to planning@trenthills.ca. The municipality requires these comments no later than 7 days after this meeting to ensure the comments can be reviewed by planning staff prior to preparing a final recommendation report to be heard at a future council meeting. Just as a reminder to individuals attending this meeting virtually, please turn off your video and mute your microphone until staff have concluded presenting the application you wish to speak to. At that time, you can turn on your video when you wish to speak to the application. I will be watching for that to ensure you are visible to myself. Unmute your microphone when you are called to speak on. Once your items are completed, you are more than welcome to stay for all of the other items at the meeting, or you may leave the meeting as well. If you are also watching the live stream and have unmuted your microphone to speak, please close any live stream volume that you have open in your browser, as there will be an audio feedback that will cause a delayed echo effect. That's all our rules and regulations for this evening. It'll go fairly smoothly. I'll be watching for any comments that you want. I'll be keeping a speakers list, but please be patient and make sure that I can see you. We'll go right to our first application, and it is severance consent application B08-2024 and B09-2024, and zoning amendment application C05-2024. And I will turn it over to our planning staff for the presentation.
And thank you through you, Deputy Mayor. Before we begin, please note that notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act for all applications on tonight's agenda. As noted, the first application is B08-2024 and B09-2024, as well as zoning amendment application C05-2024. The applicant is Rachel Carlin, and the property is located at 3699 10th Line East in the geographic township of Seymour. Severance consent application B08 proposes to create one new parcel. It's approximately 0.80 hectares or 1.97 acres. It is vacant land for residential building purposes. Severance consent application B09 will create one new parcel, approximately 0.90 hectares or 2.22 acres. It is also vacant land and will be for residential purposes. The retained portion is approximately 38.77 hectares. It contains the existing residential dwelling and the applicant did submit the zoning amendment application in conjunction with the severance applications. The current zoning of the subject property is rural environmental protection and environmentally sensitive. The proposed zoning for both severed portions would be rural residential as well as environmental protection. There would be no change in the zoning for the retained portion, so it would stay as the rural, environmental protection, and environmentally sensitive. The applicant did submit a hydrologic evaluation by DM Wills, and the official plan designation for the properties is rural and greenlands. There is no prime ag on the subject property. And again, the current zoning is rural, environmentally sensitive, and environmental protection. We did circulate to Neil Allenson, Manager of Roads and Urban Services, as well as Lower Trent Conservation Authority. So he's just going to call up the mapping, which is the mapping that was submitted with the hydrologic evaluation. So the applicant did go through an initial pre-consultation process with Lower Trent Conservation, as well as a formal pre-consultation process with Trent Hills. The pre-consultation identified that the HE was required, which is due to the provincial growth plan policies. So under the growth plan, any setbacks to any sort of water courses, wetlands would be 120 meters. The hydrologic evaluation will demonstrate how that 120 meters could be reduced down to 30 meters and provide a building envelope. So again, she did submit the detailed HE from DM Wills, and the terms of reference were initially created and provided by Lower Trent Conservation staff. With the circulation to Neil Allenson, he did provide the standard wording regarding legal and registered entrances on the severed and retained portions, and we will include this as a condition in a future staff report to council. Lower Trent Conservation provided formal comments, and they requested the applications to be deferred. The request for deferral relates to the limits of the wetland delineation. They wanted to review it and accept it at Lower Trent Conservation. The mapping provided, which is up on the screen here, is the actual excerpt from the hydrologic evaluation, which clearly defines the wetland delineation. These boundaries were determined by a qualified environmental consultant through site visits during the vegetative growing seasons, and upon our review, we were satisfied with the information provided. The mapping provided also indicates the 30-meter buffer. So if we're looking at the mapping, anything in the blue is the confirmed wetland feature. The orange is our 30-meter buffer, and the pinky color is a confirmed building envelope. So anything in the orange would remain in the environmental protection zone. And there is a suitable building envelope on both proposed severed parcels. This mapping is also very similar to the mapping that Lower Trent Conservation provided with their comments. Even their mapping showed that there is a suitable building envelope on both parcels, which is outside of the 30-meter regulated lands. Lower Trent also noted in their comments that engineered floodplain mapping wouldn't be warranted. It was their opinion that the applications were consistent with the provincial policy statement. And they noted in their comments that a wetland delineation was required to confirm the exact location and extent of the regulated features. Again, this information is being provided in the mapping in front of you, which was prepared by a qualified environmental consultant. And DM Wills is on the list of approved consultants, Lower Trent's consultants, to conduct such studies. Planning staff feel it isn't warranted for the applicant to pay the extra fees for Lower Trent to conduct their own site visit when the applicant has already paid an environmental consultant to prepare a detailed report and the mapping. The building envelopes identified are appropriate to sustain a residential dwelling, driveway, well, and septic without encroaching into the 30-meter buffer. If all development is proposed outside of the 30-meter buffer, a permit from Lower Trent will not be required prior to the issuance of any municipal permits. The only exception is potentially on B08 2024, where the 30-meter buffer does come just into the lot line, but this is a buffer to the wetland on the other side of the road. And based on previous direction from Lower Trent, normally this buffer wouldn't be a concern as the physical location of the road runs between the feature and the proposed development. So if we look at the mapping from DM Wills, again, the pink is the building envelope. These little areas that are actually cross-hatched off was a suggested building location for a house, just being the larger portion and a suitable location for a driveway. And the crosshatched is their recommendation for silt fencing to ensure we're protecting the wetland feature. So just based on the process, planning staff will be recommending approval of these applications to council when a future staff report is presented. And again, the next mapping is similar, but is just confirming that anything in the orange will be put in the environmental protection zone or vegetation protection zone, and confirming the building envelopes. And thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Liz. Is the applicant or agent present in the gallery or online? Right there. Do you have anything you'd like to add to your application?
Do you want me to come up here?
If you have anything to add, yep, come right
I
up.
don't have anything.
You're good. Liz did an excellent job of describing. Perfect. Any questions from council? I have Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Is it typical for Lower Trent to comment on the bedrock and the concern about the karst features as part of their comments?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. It is something we've been seeing probably for the last year, just because we have run into a few projects where they've started excavating and karst may be present on the subject property. And to ensure a stable base before any development takes place, if it occurs, then they would be subject to further studies.
But in no way it would have an impact on the application, it'd just be a matter of the construction. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Quick question, Lower Trent Conservation. So just to clarify, you feel their request to defer because of the wetland delineation has already been met by DM Wills, a professional consulting company that is able to do that and provide that information, which they have.
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone present here or online that would like to speak to the application?
Can I just ask, is this a single?
If you'd like to come up to the,
prefer not to.
it's a public meeting and you'll have to come up to the microphone.
And I would be on camera?
It's a public meeting and you'll have to come up to the microphone. Yeah, sorry, that's the intent of public meetings. Anyone else with question, like to speak? And I don't see anyone online. Any other further comments from planning staff? Excellent, we're on to item number 2. to severance consent application B10 2024 and zoning amendment application C06 2024.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. As noted, it's severance consent application B10 2024, as well as zoning amendment application C06 2024. The applicant is Janice Vandentillert with her agent Paul Vandentillert. Property is located at 383 11th Line West in the geographic township of Seymour. The severance application proposes to create one new park, 0.62 hectares or 4 acres. It is vacant land and will be eligible for residential building purposes. The retained portion is approximately 46.13 hectares and does contain the existing residential dwelling and outbuildings. The applicant did submit the zoning amendment application in conjunction with the severance application. The current zoning of the subject lands is rural, environmentally sensitive, as well as environmental protection and agricultural. The proposed severed portion is not located within the agricultural zone. It is in the rural zone. The severed portion will be rural residential as well as environmental protection, and there would be no change in zoning for the proposed retained portion. So it would remain as the rural, ESEP, and agricultural. All environmental protection and environmentally sensitive zoning would remain in place. We did, circulate to Neil Allenson, the manager of roads and urban services, as well as Lower Trent Conservation Authority. And the applicant had also submitted a scoped environmental impact study as prepared by AZ Otis Natural Heritage Consultants. Pull up the mapping. I apologize if some of this is repetitive, but it also applies to this application. So they did go through an initial pre-consultation process with Lower Trent Conservation, as well as a formal pre-consultation with Trent Hills. The pre-consultation identified that the scoped environmental impact study was required, and it was to include the requirements of the hydrologic evaluation, which again is due to the provincial growth plan policies to reduce that setback from 120 meters down to the 30 meters. A detailed EIS was prepared and submitted by AZ Otis in support of the application based on the terms of reference initially created and provided by Lower Trent staff. Initially, the applicants had investigated the possibility of creating 2 parcels. So you can see on the mapping the outline of the red, which is the field subject to the application. Due to it being kind of a longer, narrow field, with the setbacks to the watercourse as well as the municipal setbacks to the road, the proposal was amended to one new, larger severed parcel, which gave us a larger proposed building envelope. And circulating to Neil Allenson, the manager of roads and urban services, he did include the standard wording regarding legal and registered entrances on the severed and retained portions, which will be included as a condition in a future staff report to council. In addressing Lower Trent Conservation's comments, they did request the application be denied. The request for the denial was based on Lower Trent noting that they were not satisfied with the proposed severance if it is outside of the floodway due to the watercourse, and they are stating it hasn't been demonstrated that the proposed rural residential zoning is outside of the floodway. They also noted that the application that we circulated to them, so that was in front of them, was larger in size than what was discussed through the pre-consultation process back in 2022. So again, as noted, because they had proposed 2 smaller lots, and when we were going through our pre-consultation process, it was determined that one larger lot would be a better planning practice to ensure that we could provide a suitable building envelope. So the overall area is similar to what was discussed with Lower Trent initially. It is the same field. It just has one proposed severed parcel instead of 2. The sketch that was provided with the EIS was circulated to Lower Trent. It clearly indicates the proposed building envelope, which is up on the screen here. Although Lower Trent requested the applicant provide engineered floodplain mapping, this would actually put the applicant through another process to hire another consultant, as well as to provide the floodplain mapping. This sketch takes into consideration the 30-meter setback to the wetland, which is actually the water course, as well as all the required municipal setbacks. Lower Trent's requesting that the environmental protection zoning be applied to either 30 meters to the wetlands as well as 6 meters to the floodplains. So we do ensure that we're going with the 30 meters at environmental protection. So it actually goes beyond the 6 meters that would be required for a floodplain. This mapping was an actual excerpt from the EIS, and these boundaries were determined by the qualified environmental consultant. They did do site visits during the vegetative growing seasons, and we were satisfied with the EIS when it came in, and we gave it a complete review. And again, this mapping is very similar to the mapping that Lower Tarrant provided with their comments. The boundaries were almost identical, showing the 30-meter setback, which is what we'll be putting into the environmental protection zone to ensure it's regulated. We don't feel it's warranted for the applicant to pay the extra fees for Lower Trent Conservation to go out and conduct their own site visit when the applicant has already paid a professional environmental consultant to go out and do a detailed report as well as the mapping. So since the time of receiving their comments, we did follow up with the applicant, who is present here, as well as her agent, and we had requested the potential of a more detailed site plan, just to demonstrate with the building envelope. They actually provided two, so depending on where a proposed entrance could go, how the residential dwelling can fit in the building envelope, as well as the septic field. We are completely staying out of the 30-meter buffer. So it really does demonstrate that the building envelope can sustain a residential dwelling, driveway, well, and septic without encroaching into the 30 meters. And again, if all development is outside of that 30-meter buffer, a permit from Lower Trent Conservation is not required prior to any municipal permits being issued. I'll just pull up the second one. So again, it really depends where the driveway would be supported by the manager of roads and urban services and how everything will fit into that building envelope. It meets the 30-meter setback. It meets the municipal requirements for setbacks, which are actually larger because it's a corner lot, so the exterior side yard setbacks. And so again, based on the process, we will be recommending approval to council when the future staff report comes forward. And thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and the applicant is here. There we are. Do you have anything to add to your application this evening?
I don't think so.
If you do, yep.
I don't think there's anything added. It's great to see all the experience behind some of these severances and stuff that take on this endeavor, and it's nice to know that there's a lot of knowledge and experience here recognizing some of these properties. That's what I like to see. No, I think the planner's done a fantastic job presenting it to everyone here. So. Happy to field any questions about the physical property.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from council at this time? Councillor Brotney?
Comment, Deputy Mayor, just to show, quite often we get criticized for dragging our feet on applications and looking for answers that maybe we don't need to ask, but just refer back to the corner lot across the road from this. Years ago, the property owner, whatever reason, put a foundation on the property, and then they discovered that it was on the road allowance. And the foundation is still there today. If you look carefully in the map, you'll see it. And they had to abandon it, and they did build a building just east of where the foundation was. So it's a convoluted answer, but sometimes you need to fine tune cover all the covers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone here that would like to speak for or against the application, either in the gallery or online? Seeing none. Is there any more formal comments from, or questions from council, or comments from planning? Excellent. Move on to the next item. So we're on to agenda item C. We have zoning amendment application C07-2024, and I'll pass it over to planning.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. It's noted it's zoning amendment application C07-2024. The applicant is 283-6469 Ontario Inc. with their agent KMD Planning, which is Kevin Dugay. I do believe he is online through Zoom to assist with answering some questions at the end. Property is located at 4 Front Street South in the geographic town of Campbellford. The purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to allow an expanded multi-use within the ground floor of a commercial building. The parcel currently contains a multi-storied mixed commercial and residential building with storefront orientation along the main portion of the building and residential on the second story and above. The current zoning of the subject lands is commercial and environmental protection. The proposed zoning will be a commercial exception and will keep the environmental protection in place. The exception will allow multiple residential units to the rear of the commercial footprint of the main floor, as well as recognized parking to support the use. Again, all environmental protection will remain in place. We did circulate to Neil Allenson, the manager of Roads and Urban Services, and we did receive informal comments from Lower Trent Conservation Authority. Public comments were received from Ashley Tinney-Fisher as well as Liz Terrell, which were included in the agenda package for your review and consideration. So again, the applicant did go through a full formal pre-consultation process with Trent Hills. They also submitted a planning justification report as prepared by KMD Planning, Inc. Initially, the applicant was proposing residential units to be included along the frontage of the building, so they would be facing Front Street. Our current consolidated zoning bylaw does not permit residential units along the streetscape to ensure the facade is commercial within the downtown core. Staff recommended that the residential units be reconfigured along the front to keep it as a commercial space, and the applicant had agreed. So the commercial space along the full stretch of the front of the building will allow a more consistent look, which is one of the most predominant intersections within the downtown core of Campbellford. Currently as well, the Trent Hills zoning bylaw states that no more than 50% of the ground floor may be occupied by a dwelling unit. It is not plural, it just says unit, within non-residential buildings. So going through this process with the zoning bylaw amendment will also clarify that more than one dwelling unit is being considered on the main floor. When we circulated to Neil Allenson, the manager of Roads and Urban Services, he did state that parking for these new units cannot be located as on-street parking. Staff had advised the agent to ensure that the owner or the landlord is explicitly clear with the tenants regarding the approved parking locations. During the pre-consultation, obviously parking was part of the discussion. So the owner has entered into an agreement with the owners of 36 Saskatoon, which is the former McDonald's convenience store, gas station. So they did secure 4 dedicated parking spaces for the new units. The subject lands are also, they're uniquely situated where all required services are within a walkable distance and could potentially function with limited parking. So as noted in the Lower Trent email, they were not formally circulated on this application, but planning staff did participate in separate communications with Lower Trent Conservation staff prior to this whole process, and as well as once it was posted on our website. And so currently their concern is the floodplain, but currently the floodplain is located within the existing riverbed, or the Trent riverbed, which is surrounded by the core wall. So although Lower Trent notes the proposed updated floodplain mapping, this mapping is not yet finalized, nor is it in effect. So it really can't be considered for this application. So staff have requested the owner, based on that, we've requested the owner to undertake the services of an Ontario land surveyor to provide an elevation survey. But it should also be noted, I guess, if you're going over the bridge and if you're viewing the back of the building and you can see the river and the core wall, it really only comes up partway for the basement level, and then you have the remainder of the basement level, and then you have the first floor that we're looking at doing the residential units on. So it really is a unique opportunity. It will provide much-needed smaller and attainable residential rental opportunities, and it is maintaining the retail commercial along the frontage of the downtown core. And it's also providing smaller commercial spaces with the renovations that they're proposing, as opposed to one large commercial space. And I know we've all seen businesses try to move in there. It really was a massive commercial space. It was too large for any smaller operations to sustainably stay in that building as a commercial unit. So the application doesn't propose any exterior alterations. It doesn't propose any new buildings for the subject land. It's all renovations associated with the zoning bylaw amendment are just strictly interior to the existing building. So again, based on all of that, the pre-consultation, the studies that have been submitted and all the discussions, when this does come forward to council, that staff will be recommending approval to move forward. And we do have on the screen just showing how the residential units, the river would be at the top end. There is some green lands in between, then the core wall and the river. The 4 smaller units, as well as the smaller commercial units, which will be fronting onto Front Street. And thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Liz. I see Mr. Duguay has joined us. Are you representing the applicant this evening, Kevin?
Deputy Mayor Metcalf, I am indeed.
Do you have anything to add to the application other than what has been presented by planning?
I would like to speak briefly, if I might, Deputy Mayor Metcalf. I want to first start off, I believe one of your councillors commented around process and the length of process. Well, this is an application where I can advise council that there has not been delays, that staff have been particularly cooperative and helpful. There was a pre-consultation meeting at which the issue of site parking, how could site parking be addressed on a property which provides no parking? Arising from that was a request to seek out off-site options. I can confirm, and included as part of my planning justification report was a copy of a signed parking agreement having a initial 5-year term with renewable provisions for 4 site parking spaces at 36 Saskatoon Avenue, which is within walking distance of the subject property. Concerns have been received, I believe, from the public insofar as and even staff about the utilization of the street to provide parking for the residential units. In this instance, that would be mitigated by way of an offsite arrangement. Now, I can advise council in my professional capacity in other communities. This has been an approach that has been successfully undertaken in midtown and downtown portions of communities, and it has worked very well. I would suggest as a measure that the agreement could also be registered, if necessary, registered on title. That is at the property at 36 Saskatoon Avenue, if required. The other matter I'd like to just draw to council's attention, at the provincial planning conference held last fall in Ottawa, the very topic of main streets and allowing some portion of the main floor building or the main floor of existing commercial buildings to be used for residential purposes was discussed and formed part of Main Street presentations. This is a reoccurring theme happening in towns, villages, and even cities throughout Ontario. So this is not unique. The notion of a topographical survey, which I assume is attempting to establish the finished floor elevation relative to the river, my position is that we're going to find that that finished floor elevation relative to the rear of the building is already elevated substantively above the embankment, and there are no flood issues. It does represent an expense, and it will represent a delay in advancing this application. I don't think it will produce a result that would necessarily say no to the proposed 4 small apartments in the rear portion of the building. Lastly, the Main Street commercial profile is being maintained, and the main floor, it is clearly less than 50% of the main floor would be devoted to 4 small rental apartments. I make myself, lastly, Mr. Chairman, in the agenda, there was reference to a late addendum public comments from a Liz Terrell, which I have not been able to source, so I'm not in a position to comment to same at this point. I'm not certain if staff could, if that's appropriate, if staff could outline the concern, because I have not had opportunity to consider same. And I'll conclude by saying I support staff's recommendation to, this application it represents good planning. It is consistent with provincial policy directives and would introduce 4 new apartments, rental apartments, small scale within your downtown. I make myself to respond to any queries of council at this time. Thank you again, Deputy Mayor Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Duque. The correspondence from Liz Terrell, in short, was a positive and reinforcement for your application, and I'm sure staff will send it along, but it was a positive response to your application.
And I welcome same. Thank you.
I'll open questions up to council, and we have Councillor Pope.
I guess my concern is if the parking isn't on title, what happens after 5 years if the current agreement doesn't work? We already have a parking problem on Front Street, both nighttime and daytime, with tenants in the building. So, I like the idea of it being on title. Mr. Duguay, have you had other opportunities to find other places when the deal goes away?
If I might, am I allowed to respond, Deputy Mayor Metcalfe?
Yes, and then I'll have planning staff if they have a response to that as well.
Thank you. We had explored other properties within a walking distance of the subject lands. This was the only one that was available. I reached out directly to some of my own contacts. This is the one that was available. To Councillor Pope's question, should something change relative to Saskatoon, then it would be incumbent upon the property owner to seek out and find alternate arrangements, but it's at least for 5 years. And I'm also aware that many municipalities in their central areas are taking a very serious look at parking requirements at all for residential units. Although that's perhaps at a future a matter, but it would be a 5-year term, and there is renewable provisions. And I did an evaluation of the former McMillan's property, assuming the gas canopy would ultimately be removed. And if its main floor was be occupied, my calculations suggest that its parking could be provided, as well as the 4 proposed for the subject lands, the off-street arrangement, and so that the Saskatoon Avenue properties parking wouldn't be compromised, if that's of any value and help to council.
Thank you, Mr. Duguay. Does planning have anything they'd like to add to that? Crystal?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. We can just add to Mr. Gay's comments in terms of the suggestion for registering title is something definitely we can consider to make that agreement more official and enforceable. As well, there is also parking is within the zoning bylaw, and the comprehensive zoning bylaw is enforceable by municipality as well. So it would be possible for the municipality to reach out to the landowner and require them to find new parking locations.
Thank you, Crystal. Any other questions from council? Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to the parking issue. Then if there's delegated spots for the tenants and they continue to park on the street, is that something that will come back to a cost to the property owner through bylaw, or because it'd be more of a burden on bylaw to answer those calls, right?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. It would be done through bylaw at this point in time, so they would be enforcing through their avenue they have currently, so it would be ticketing for parking. And then hopefully if that was to occur enough times, staff can reach out to property owners to require them to rectify the issue if that enforcement isn't working. There is also just in general the idea that in most municipalities you will find downtown areas struggle with parking because our buildings are so old and take up the majority of those footprints. So staff are continually looking for new solutions that we can deal with parking issues for these buildings because we're looking for uses to go into them, and any use we have needs some sort of parking requirement. So we're continually looking at different solutions that can protect us if the current solutions don't always pan out the way we expect them to.
Thank you, Crystal. Any other questions from council? I have a quick couple questions. The size of the residential units that are there, they are, smallest one is 35 meters squared and the largest one is just over 45 meters squared. Do they fit into the regulations of building size for units? I'm guessing that was all sort of looked at and they fit into those minimums?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. We do not have a minimum requirement within our zoning.
Okay.
What we rely on is the Ontario Building Code, which requires a certain amount of space for a self-contained dwelling unit, and that was what would regulate the amount of space. From the numbers that we've seen on the application, they do look like they're in the ballpark that a building permit could be issued for each of those units. And that bachelor unit / one bedroom type offering is something that is a housing typology that we need within the municipality.
Okay. Thank you, Crystal. My second question is with concern to the two commercial units at the front. If I remember correctly, with just driving past this building, the one commercial unit will have an entrance and a storefront window. The second one looks to me to be behind block walls. Is that second unit, they will have to go indoors in order to access that, and there'll be no outdoor storefront to that one?
So through you, I will provide a response, and then I will defer to Kevin to provide additional information. But based off that sketch, it doesn't show any access currently into the building. This is mainly for planning purposes to show you where those units will be located. And when building permits and renovation drawings are available, they will show where ingress and egress are. I would suspect that it would be accessible road. However, that would be up to the applicant how they want to configure that. I'm not sure if potentially Mr. Duguay has some insight into that.
Yes, Kevin, if you have anything to add.
I would be pleased to, Deputy Mayor Metcalf. Firstly, I'll speak to the residential units. The floor areas would comply with Ontario Building Code provisions. Secondly, with respect to the proposed 3 commercial units, there is some flexibility. They could end up being 1 unit, they could be 2 units. We will work diligently with staff to ensure that a main street context and feel is maintained arising from any internal renovations to the building.
Thank you for that clarification. I think it's important to keep that look in downtown core. So when we're splitting that up, that's something that we need to always think about. Is there anyone here that would like to speak for or against? Nancy, come up to the podium. State your name and your address.
Nancy Allenson, Trent Hills Chamber of Commerce, 51 Grand Road. And we support this amendment based on 50% of the commercial space is being street facing. And we would certainly like to encourage the space to be created so it attracts retail establishments for the downtown Campbellford. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm sure that was noted. Is there anyone else in the gallery or online that would like to speak to this application, either for or in opposition? And I don't see any at this time. Is there any final questions from council or comments from planning staff? Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Duguay, for your involvement as well.
You're quite welcome. Everyone have a good evening.
That brings us to our final item on our agenda, item number D, and it is zoning bylaw amendment C082024. And I will turn it over to planning for the presentation of this application.
So thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening to residents that are attending in person and also to those who are attending virtually. So staff have been undertaking a review of short-term accommodations beginning in May of 2022. So this meeting constitutes the second public meeting held to discuss the topic. As well, it's supported by 4 reports that have gone to council providing context and status updates from staff. For those that are interested in the content of those reports, you can access them from the municipality's Civic Web portal. The most recent report that you'll find on the link, it provides all the links to the previous reports. There is quite a bit of information that I want to get through tonight, so I have notes. So if I'm looking down here and not looking at everyone, please, my apologies. As well, I did want to outline that comments for this specific application, while we appreciate them within 7 days, we will accept them beyond that 7-day timeframe. The 7 days applies more to the previous applications as we take them to council more quickly. So notifications to residents is provided through a posting on the municipal website, and as well, notification was put in the local newspaper. We also have kept a record of residents requesting notification on a decision to short-term accommodations. So as a courtesy, we did use that list to provide notification of the status updates and advertise for this public meeting. So as noted, this application for the proposed bylaw applies to all applicable or all property owners within the municipality of Trent Hills. Next slide. Excuse me. So the purpose of the municipally initiated amendments is to update the comprehensive zoning bylaw to include permissions for short-term accommodations within the municipality of Trent Hills. So currently, the only similar short-term accommodation use that is permitted in the residential areas is the traditional bed and breakfast model. So all other forms are not permitted and have been regulated as such by the municipality's bylaw enforcement department. So this proposed amendment being presented aims to allow multiple forms of short-term accommodation through the expansion of your typical bed and breakfast use. So staff have worked with our solicitor as well to consider a nuisance bylaw to address many of the enforcement complaints that have been documented throughout this process. We have listed the public comments received prior to the agenda publishing deadline, which is the 3 that are listed. Staff have received 5 additional submissions since publishing, and any additional submissions, as well as those 5, will be reviewed and brought forward to council for consideration. However, we are hopeful that this presentation will cover most of the areas that were outlined. So this is just giving a bit of an overview. Since the initial public meeting, the approach has shifted to now recommending short-term accommodation options that also prioritize a long-term residential unit on the property. So the approach is recommended to balance the principal use of the long-term residency within residential areas, while also allowing short-term accommodations to provide additional income to landowners. So factors that have influenced the recommendation include different positioning of the provincial governments across the country, and also more specifically, Ontario provincial government legislation that has changed to support housing. So staff have also completed a jurisdictional review of 12 municipalities, many that are neighboring us, to understand how other municipalities are approaching short-term accommodations. And of note, was how municipality regulations continue to shift as municipalities are all grappling with the best way to control and regulate the new land use. Of the 12 municipalities reviewed, 5 municipalities have chosen to regulate short-term accommodations, while 2 of the 5 have shifted from an approach away from whole home short-term accommodations to focus on owner-occupied short-term accommodations. Staff also completed a review of our capacity within the municipality to effectively and efficiently administer licensing applications, to also review locations and enforce these requirements. Staff also, in summer of 2023, we continued to communicate through landowner education that short-term accommodation is not currently a permitted use within the municipality, and the enforcement of non-compliant properties has continued. Staff continued to receive complaints and use education enforcement to respond, and the municipality has communicated with sharing the economy sharing platforms such as Airbnb and VRBO to provide municipal regulations. So in the summer of 2023, we did have 70 site visits that occurred. All visits were specific to short-term rentals where the whole home was rented and the landowner was not present on the property. As a best practice, short-term accommodations where a landowner, property manager, or long-term tenant is present require less enforcement and gain compliance through hosts being present on the site. The work completed through the end of 2022 and 2023 is what's shaped the new recommendations by staff. So this slide outlines the approach that staff are considering for short-term accommodations that are being recommended within the municipality. So through the amendment that is proposed, the amendment will allow the traditional bed and breakfast model where the owner is present and is renting out bedrooms within the same dwelling unit. This option will also permit the construction of a bunkie on the property where the guest could be within a separate building but may share the washrooms and other facilities with the main dwelling unit. The modified option would allow for an additional residential unit on the property to be rented out as a short-term accommodation. So we are aware of some properties that already have a separately contained dwelling unit on their property, and this allows both the renter and the landowner to have their own privacy while also keeping landowner present to monitor for enforcement. It also keeps the primary residential use of the land use designation intact while allowing flexibility to earn additional income with the rental. So these two examples represent the short-term accommodations where the landowner is present on the subject lands. Staff understand through communication with residents that they're interested in options that allow for the ownership of more than one residential property within the municipality where that property can be rented out. In an effort to allow this use while also prioritizing housing, staff have created some options that accomplish both. So the third option you'll see here, what I've listed as expanded bed and breakfast, and these are not going to be formal terms, they're just something I'm using to try and communicate the difference between all of these options. So the expanded bed and breakfast allows a landowner to rent out their short-term accommodation if they have a property manager that's living in a unit on the property. So this can be someone who's in the same dwelling unit and renting out the rooms, or it could be someone who's on the same property in a separately self-contained residential unit. The fourth is the hybrid bed and breakfast, which would allow you to operate a short-term accommodation without a property manager or yourself on the subject lands, provided you provide a long-term housing unit on the property. So this will allow those that are interested and willing to provide rental options that are needed, while also creating additional income through short-term accommodations. The final option that we have outlined is rentals that are for the purpose of transient worker housing. So the intent of this bylaw is not to take away from accommodators that are assisting with housing where there is a need that we're looking for, where we don't have a different solution. From a land use planning perspective, the provision of worker housing within Trent Hills is different than the provision of short-term accommodation. So you will often find in permitted uses within a comprehensive zoning bylaw that speaks specifically to worker housing as a separate use. So staff anticipate that the supporting nuisance bylaw would include provisions that distinguish between worker housing and short-term accommodations to allow for the provision of housing for transient workers. And then the final option we have is outlined as a whole home short-term accommodation where there's no long-term housing unit on the subject lands. So staff are recommending that this option is not permitted as of right within the comprehensive zoning bylaw. For the reasons outlined on the previous slide, staff are looking for options that continue to allow residential properties to function as long-term housing. While it's understood their properties currently being used as short-term accommodations, it is noted that this option is not currently permitted within municipal bylaws. So staff are not looking to remove an existing permission within the bylaw, but will instead focus the permissions on different options of short-term accommodations that will provide that will be more sustainable within the municipality. And I want to note as well that this option, while it's not proposed to be as of right across the municipality, it would be available on a site-specific basis should a landowner feel their property is better suited for this use. So this would still be possible if the landowner would like to submit a zoning bylaw amendment application, and then staff would assist with pre-consultation in determining whether the property is a good candidate. So this provides an overview of the short-term accommodation options that we're proposing for Trent Hills. So staff have outlined 5 out of 6 scenarios where they would be permitted. 2 of these options would be for owner-occupied short-term accommodations, and 3 of these options would be a form of whole home short-term accommodation. Staff are only recommending 1 of the 6 options not be permitted as of right. Next slide. So the next few slides show detail of the drafted zoning bylaw amendment. Draft was emailed to those on the short-term accommodation distribution list, and staff will also post the draft of the on the municipal website following this meeting for anyone else who would like to see. The majority of the content, though, is included in these slides. It's not a very large bylaw. So the definition of bed and breakfast has been modified to permit the different forms of bed and breakfast as we described on the previous slide. And the bylaw outlines that the accommodation can be within the principal dwelling unit as well as in an associated structure like a bunkie, or it can be within a self-contained dwelling unit on the property. The approach has been recommended to stay straightforward in allowing the use without requiring many additional elements other than the creation of the unit itself. The main requirements will include the required parking that's already within the zoning bylaw and approvals to meet the building code and the fire code, as well as any requirements from the health unit. As well, staff has expanded upon the zones in which a bed and breakfast could be permitted. Currently, this use is not permitted in a commercial area, and staff are recommending that this use be added to the commercial areas to allow downtown landowners the ability to create and operate a short-term accommodation. So in conjunction with the recommendation of provisions for short-term accommodations, staff have proposed a nuisance bylaw to address the enforcement comments received over the last 2 years, both through policy review and update process, as well as through general enforcement practices. So the bylaw has been drafted as a support for the new zoning bylaw provisions proposed to allow short-term accommodations. And I'll just walk through an overview of what's included in that draft. So the bylaw would include a definition of what a short-term rental nuisance is. And this could include things such as whole home STAs that haven't been approved by council. It could also include STAs that aren't on maintained roads or STAs that don't have any emergency markers on them. The nuisance can also include whatever the municipality would like to see on it, such as the ability to regulate for noise, garbage, and parking. As we continue to finalize the draft, we'll work to figure out the mechanics of how the bylaw will be implemented. The bylaw also includes some exemptions, so this will help us enforce some of the comments and questions that staff have received related to renting to family and friends, as well as renting transient workers. The bylaw also allows enforcement staff the ability to gain compliance from both guests and operators or anyone who's in care and control of the property, like a tenant on the property subject lands. So the bylaw would allow for inspections and audits for enforcement to attend the properties. And as well, the bylaw would authorize orders and fines for infractions. And if these fines are not paid, they could be added to a tax roll and can be collected in this manner. So the bylaw would apply to the entirety of the municipality and will provide additional support to regulate contraventions. This new bylaw would include tools for bylaw enforcement, such as being able to lay ticketed fines that may be able to gain compliance easier than some of our existing bylaws. With that being said, however, all of those existing bylaws would remain in place and will continue to be in effect for all of the properties. So that concludes the overview of the proposed permissions to allow short-term accommodations within the municipality. So following this public meeting, staff will continue to receive public comments and will consolidate these comments for both the public and for council. So the policy approach presented represents a great opportunity for the municipality to permit short-term accommodations that will support the tourism industry within the municipality through an approach that doesn't do a disservice to another important land use. So staff have reviewed options that permit the short-term use while also permitting the original residential use that we are in need of. The inclusion of short-term accommodations within the municipality will not only bring business to the accommodation proprietor, but also to local businesses, restaurants, grocers, and tourism activities. So the approach we've outlined will allow those visiting and vacationing within the municipality to find accommodations in Trent Hills. So for anyone who is looking to be kept up to date, can subscribe to the news and notices section on the website. And I would encourage those who haven't provided written comments, and if you're looking to speak tonight, if you could provide your contact information for us. We did place a clipboard over by the podium, so after you speak, if you haven't already sent something that would allow us to contact you, if you could include your information there, that'll allow us to provide responses to anything that we can't answer tonight. As well, if you are speaking and you provide comments, it's also helpful if you do submit a written copy of that, so you can also provide the same comments to us through an email, and that way we can make sure we have completely in your words, as well as what we are taking for notes. So that is everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Crystal. At this time, I'll ask if council has questions for planning staff. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, a couple questions, actually. For the hybrid and the transient accommodations, is it expected, well, A, that there will only be one long-term resident or greater than 30-day resident, or would there be a mix of those and short-term residents on the property?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, for the hybrid model, it would allow for one long-term tenant unit, and there can be a full separate unit that is permitted for short-term accommodation, so they can both be operating at the same time on the property.
Is that the case also for the transient?
Yes.
So then is the obligation that those tenants are to act as property managers for the property?
Not necessarily. The model we're taking is that someone who is that close to a short-term accommodation unit that is located on the same property, they will just, by virtue of being that close to each other, regulate the use. So they don't have to operate as the property manager, but they will be on the property. If you're living that close to a short-term accommodation and there are any complaints, the chances are that it won't be dealt with by the municipality. It will be dealt with through the landowners. That being said, we will have the short-term nuisance bylaw that would be able to regulate any issues that are occurring with that short-term accommodation use.
So that there is a bit of an expectation on those tenants to manage and mitigate any nuisance bylaw noises and that stuff, or at least an expectation that they would be upset enough to control other tenants in the property, respectfully?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, the main purpose of that is to ensure that the residential use on the property is not being lost. So it's more about ensuring that we have long-term housing on our residential properties and less about them enforcing the use. That being said, and a byproduct of them being on the property is that What we have seen through many municipalities and case studies is that when you do have someone else that is living on that property, you are more respectful to your neighbors, and they will just automatically regulate each other. There wouldn't be any expectation on that tenant to enforce the short-term accommodation that's on the property.
Okay, I can see that for the hybrid, maybe not so much for the transit. Is there any consideration to help maybe with the hybrid and transit, and maybe even possibly the one that staff isn't recommending, to have a authorized or licensed property management company to act as a property manager rather than expecting the tenants to act as a property manager? Is that an option to help with the short-term accommodation issues and the nuisance bylaws, where they can act as the authority for the owner?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, so that the transient worker is in a different category than the typical short-term accommodations that are occurring. Again, typically those are not the ones that we're getting any complaints from, because they're people that are living there for work, and they are using it more like even though it's shorter periods, they're using it more like a long-term rental. So they're really, from an enforcement perspective, we're not anticipating as much from that property. The issue with, we can consider the property management. The requirement of property manager from a different, or a company, requires us to include more of the licensing element and creating a larger program that would require more capacity from the municipality. Why we have focused on this approach is because we do not have that capacity within the municipality. It's something we've looked at, and we can continue to look at it.
But we're talking about 70-plus houses or homes that would need to fall under this sort of, the houses that are, the businesses that aren't acting lawfully right now as a short-term rental, is that correct, or short-term accommodation, is that correct?
So the numbers we're looking at now are the numbers we have when the use is not permitted within the municipality. So that is the number of people that are willing to do the use when it is not currently permitted. What this would be is, once the use is permitted within the municipality, the number could be much larger than that. So it could be a much larger obligation for the municipality to enforce at that point in time.
Sorry, I know, I keep pardon me, last one, I promise. But that's certainly something that we could reflect into the fees of the bylaw, where there'd be a requirement for those fees be on the owner's responsibility, and then through the rentals. Is that a possibility, or just to help encourage?
Yes, if we were going to entertain a licensing program, that is something that could occur.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor English.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Crystal, you answered a question that Daniel just, I was wondering about that as well. As far as property managers go, and you're stated about the homeowner being present, or the owner, did you consider putting a radius on that at all? Like the owner could live 5 kilometers away?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor, we did look at radius distances for either a property manager or the owner. From a land use planning perspective, if you're going to permit a use, you want to make sure that that use can be meet all the policies and requirements you need within its own boundaries. It becomes more difficult if we're requiring certain people to live in certain areas, because that's difficult for us to enforce. It just requires us to use other tools to ensure that we're meeting land use policy. It also doesn't assist with the housing issue that we're also trying to address with this approach.
Okay, well, like, I know one in Warkworth, for example. It's well maintained, well kept up. It's used, it's needed, because there are not many motels in Warkworth. And I would think, you know, if you could put some kind of a radius on something like that, it would be helpful to the owner of the place as well. It's just a thought that I had over there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions from council? I don't see any at this time. I'm going to open the floor. I anticipate there's going to be a little bit of a discussion and questions. I'm going to rotate from in-person to virtual. Anyone who's joining us online, I'd like to ask you to use that little hand button to signal that you'd like to speak so that we can see anyone that is online that would like to speak, and I will do my best to rotate around. Forgive me if I point or say what shirt you're wearing or something, because I do not know everybody's name, but we'll make sure that everyone gets a moment to speak. So I will open it at this time if anyone would like to take the first stab at it. Nancy, I do know your name. If you want to come up to the podium.
And Nancy Allenson, 51 Grand Road, Campbellford, on behalf of the Trent Hills Chamber of Commerce. So I'm here tonight to share how eliminating accommodations that do not fall under the proposed bylaw changes will impact the tourism economy. The majority of the STAs will not comply with the bylaw. That will be devastating for tourism in Trent Hills. Where do you expect the visitors to stay? If you follow through with this, maybe 20% of the STAs might be able to comply. And what is the solution to fill the void that the other 80% would have housed? Tourism is the second largest economic driver in Trent Hills, behind agriculture. We all enjoy the benefits of tourism: multiple grocery and food retailers, restaurants, breweries, wedding and event venues, specialty shops, agritourism, attractions like West Bend, the Oz Center, work with Maple Syrup Festival coming up this weekend, got a little plug in for that, and the Hastings Waterfront Festival, just to name a few. We have more than 20 annual festivals and events. This is an incredible array of tourism offerings for a municipality the size of Trent Hills that both day trippers and, in particular, overnight visitors can enjoy. I urge you to read the STA reviews. You will clearly see the role they play in generating tourism income beyond their establishment. You'll see comments about visiting the communities, shopping in the stores, eating out, picking up takeout, stocking up on groceries, enjoying the events and things to do in Trent Hills. In addition, STAs provide valuable marketing for Trent Hills, promoting the local businesses, events, and attractions. They reach out prior to the visit to showcase all that we have to offer. They have brochures, maps, binders full of information when their guests arrive. Losing these Trent Hills ambassadors would be a huge loss from a marketing perspective. Overnight guests significantly outspend day trippers, boosting the local businesses. This could be another loss for our tourism economy. STAs offer more options for visitors during high season, catering to the demand when our motels, inns, and cottages cannot meet that demand. They create a demand for cleaning, laundry, property management services, and local tradespeople. They also attract new residents. We've heard that guests have fallen in love with the area and decided to move here, contributing to the local economy. Tourism funding and grants often hinge on the ability to increase overnight stays. Case in point is the current funding program through Regional Tourism Organization 8, where applications are assessed on their ability to attract overnight visitors. If we don't have the capacity, how can we market to overnight visitors? And a reminder that STAs don't just serve holiday visitors, they also accommodate guests for weddings, funerals, celebrations of life, and I'm glad to see that the transient workers has been addressed. I've learned that tonight. Complaints are a legitimate concern, particularly issues that are arising from out-of-town STA owners that are not responsible hosts and they do not play an active role monitoring the rental property. Let's look for a solution that does not sacrifice STAs that are doing a great job due to irresponsible owners or operators that lead to complaints. Responsible owners and operators have systems in place to ensure the guest has an enjoyable experience while not disrupting the neighborhood. The December 12th report suggests that hundreds could be converted into long-term housing. It'd be nice to know the rationale behind that number and see a study proving if these STAs will actually go back into the long-term housing, especially for residents that are cottages. In many cases, they actually can't be full-time residences, and they will be just sold as cottages. For those properties that could transition to long-term housing, how many of these would fall under affordable housing? That's been noted as a priority at Council recently as well. I can't stress enough the importance of STAs to the Trent Hills economy. We urge Council to consider a more balanced approach that supports tourism, addresses housing needs, and ensures compliance with reasonable standards. There's been a long-standing issue of STAs operating without formal regulation, and regardless of past oversight, the focus needs to be on mitigating tourism impact. If Council is determined to take this route, at least consider a more inclusive approach. As Councillor English just mentioned, Perhaps you could actually expand that to include somebody that lives nearby or within a 15-minute drive or even within the municipality of Trent Hills. In many cases, the owner, a relative, or a property manager lives right next door. And I think they would not allow, I just saw the notice about the zoning bylaw amendments. That might be an opportunity for many of our whole home accommodations to come forward and have a meeting like tonight. In our opinion, the impact of tourism by proceeding with the draft recommendations as they stand would be substantial and would require a task force. Is this something that council is willing to take on? Of the 70 site visits in response to complaints, were those 70 individual STAs, or would some of them be multiple visits to the same STA? We understand the need for housing, and we have a particular interest in workforce housing. Would the municipality help transition non-compliant STAs by connecting owners with businesses that have employees in need of housing? We know council values tourism and understands how important it is to our economy. These STAs are a valuable tourism resource and tremendous ambassadors for Trent Hills. Please seek an alternative that would not have such a negative impact on tourism. Thank you. And just one more question, since this is the first I've heard of the zoning bylaw amendment, what would be some circumstances through you, Deputy Mayor, where that would be an amendment made for a whole home?
Thank you, Nancy. Crystal, do you have,
Could,
so the question was the whole home and the exemptions that may come forward that you spoke to when you were going through that list and what the possibilities of those are.
are you speaking for a zoning bylaw amendment or?
I believe that's, yeah, that was the whole home, and that would be the only exemption is to go through a zoning process.
Yes, so through you, Deputy Mayor, the option would be if they can't fit within the 5 that we are permitting, they would have the option, because it's all through zoning bylaw amendment or through the comprehensive zoning bylaw, they could submit a zoning bylaw amendment application. So it would come through the same as all of the files we had today, where it would be reviewed before council. Does that answer your question? If you would like more, you can repeat it.
So what would be some examples where an exemption would be made?
So the way that it's stated, it's through a zoning process. So it isn't an exemption that would just be granted. You would have to apply for a zoning change on that property. That would be the exemption. Crystal?
So through you, Deputy Mayor, it would be up to the landowner to present the rationale why we should change from the approach that's listed in the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So it could be if there really is a scenario as to why that house could not be used as long-term housing stock, that may be a reason that they could provide. It would need to be submitted to us for review, and that could potentially be something that is considered.
Thank you, Nancy. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak this evening? I don't see anyone online. Elizabeth. Wow, I'm doing good with names. I've got 2. Yeah, come right up. And just name and address, please, Liz.
Okay. My name is Elizabeth Aikenhead. I live at 14055 County Road 29 in Warkworth. I'm just going to read the note I wrote earlier today. This just came to our attention in the last couple of days. We had no idea that this was on the table. My name is Elizabeth Aikenhead, and I live in Warkworth. I am the former owner of our Lucky Stars Cafe and Roasters, which I owned for almost 10 years. For many years, I also hosted Airbnb guests at the Upper Stars apartment above the cafe, and also at our home, Mustard Hill House. In this capacity, I became well acquainted with the great need for short-term accommodation in this area. The cafe was and continues to be a hub of the community, and as such reflects a broad cross-section of the local population, as well as tourists and visiting professionals, including healthcare professionals, who we desperately need to attract to our community. In any given day, there'd be an inquiry about short-term accommodations that might be available in the area for a wide variety of reasons. Family members attending weddings, funerals, reunions, or caring for aged parents and visitors to the Bridge Hospice. At the Upper Stars and at Mustard Hill House, we hosted doctors doing rotations, residencies, and locums in the area. We had writers on retreat, we had PhD candidates studying, we had families looking for a break in the country, people going from Montreal to Toronto and around the country, breaking up their trips. We had visitors coming to have a culinary experience at Spare, artists attending a workshop or an arts festival, musicians playing at a music festival, we know which one, and many young travelers from all over the world who wanted to experience the natural beauty of the region. They weren't partiers. In every case, these individuals shopped and dined in Warkworth, Hastings, and Campbellford, and supported our local businesses and festivals. Short-term accommodation of all types is an essential service in our community and fundamental to attract not just tourism, but also to recruit and retain professionals doing locums, consultations, or participating in cultural experiences in the area. And as Nancy cited, this is 50% of our economy. At no point did we ever have problems or nuisance complaints. Airbnb worked very well for both host and guest, as it gives the host the opportunity to communicate with the guest and ascertain if they're a good fit. And it gives both parties the chance to read reviews and ratings of the guest, the host, and the accommodation, as well as offering tips about the community. Airbnb also offered us insurance coverage, code of conduct policies, and it charges the guest an accommodation tax that is ultimately to go to the region or the municipality. I urge you to not disallow short-term accommodation of all types in this Trent Hills. If the municipality feels a solution may be to introduce a licensing program, perhaps a modest annual fee. I know from a friend we all know, actually, and in the county is $100 a year for short-term accommodations that meet whatever standard of safety and hygiene are required. In that particular area, there are requirements to inspect your fire services every month. So that's making sure your fire extinguishers are up to code, that kind of thing. And other points, I understand there isn't the budget to hire someone to implement and administer these things. If there aren't funds, has a Trillium grant been considered, or funds coming from Northumberland Tourism or Ontario, from the province? It's agreed that the long-term vision for Trent Hills should definitely include a broad range of long-term housing and short-term accommodation that serves the diverse needs of our present and future population. Currently, we're witnessing subdivisions with single-family homes being built. How many houses are currently being built or are in planning? Is it about 500? Don't know where those doctors are going to come from, but that's a different issue. This serves a demographic able to afford and who desire a single-family dwelling. It would seem this new housing is all dependent upon a vehicle for access. It is imperative that our municipality also address endeavours to create affordable, appealing rental units for young professionals, small families, and seniors, especially those downsizing, and ideally in a walkable community, as well as short-term accommodation. This is imperative to create a vital, sustainable community and economy. Could developers be required to provide a certain amount of affordable rental accommodation in each of their new developments? In some communities, Toronto, for example, developers are required to spend a small portion of their budget on art. Are there currently any endeavours to build affordable, desirable, centrally located rental units? Thank you for the opportunity to air my views, and thank you to our local Chamber of Commerce and to our councillors and to bringing this matter to our attention. I also would just kind of like to draw your, the irony of this logo, the slogan, "Come for a visit." Where are you going to stay? Stay for a lifestyle. Anyway, I have more to say, but I'm going to cut it at that. And also, some of you may be aware there's sort of a 13-page document on the website. If you can make your way through it, there are lots of other comments and points to be made and addressed if people write letters. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Some well-researched good points there, so it's great to take. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak? So I'm going to go here and then here. Okay, you can come up. And just name and address, please.
Leah Soffers, 38 Cedar Shores. I did not prepare to speak, but I would like to actually balance a little bit here as well. I spoke on the last public hearing last year, Deputy Mayor, and I want to commend the staff on picking up on the concerns that I expressed at that time. I live next to an Airbnb, and it's still published. There are still people coming there, although it's quiet in the wintertime. But I have to say, it is hard to deal with new neighbors every weekend, especially if this is groups of 8 to 10 people. I'm not the one who wants to walk over and spoil their fun. I mean, they rented, they paid a good sum of money to actually be there and use the property. I don't want to walk over and spoil it for them. But if they go outside, they play music loudly, I don't care if that's like my neighbor's party every once in a while. But if my neighbor has a party every weekend and it's a new neighbor, this is very hard for people in the residential area, especially for an aging residential area. I have a lot of people in my area that have just retired, are enjoying their space, they're quiet, the water carries the noise. So I really wanted to say that I like the proposal, but I hope we stay with it and it gets approval from council. But I am concerned, obviously, for an expansion to unmonitored short-term stay accommodation. And as I expressed before, I feel like the social control of the owner being on the property or very close by the property is actually what keeps it from becoming a nuisance. So, rest with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. And we'll come over here and again, just name and address, please.
I was going to read my letter. And so, my name is Trevor Spott. I have lived in this area for 11 years. I purchased a rundown, derelict, nearly abandoned house at 18 Nelson Street in Warkworth in 2017. It was a nasty, nasty house. Nobody would touch it. I was planning to tear it down and build a duplex to create more accommodation for the town. I was told by County Road that I would have to build 100 feet from the road center. This gave me a 7-foot wide house. I thought that was pretty unreasonable, considering all the other houses are not 100 feet from the center of the road. Since that was not going to work, I opened up the house to discover it was a very old house, approximately 1860s, based on newspapers used as wallpaper to stop the drafts. Fortunately, my passion and experience is restoration of old houses. After putting in enough money to build a new house, I had a beautiful historic home in Warkworth. Since the house was finished in 2018, I have used it as my personal residence as well as renting out a room to a tenant and occasionally having it available on Airbnb. When COVID hit, Airbnb shut down and I rented out the entire house to 2 tenants while I stayed elsewhere to look after my aging parents. This was a disaster. Permanent tenants fall under the Landlord-Tenant Act, and they can trash your house, not pay rent, run up your bills, and you can look there and watch your money just drift away, and you have no power to stop them. The Landlord-Tenant Act is not a really enforceable thing. I've seen far too many people get their livelihoods destroyed and all of their investments and endeavors in this community destroyed by the Landlord-Tenant Act. So if you want to take on the Landlord-Tenant Act and fight the province, good luck. That's going to take a lot more work than what you have here. Anyways, I repaired the house. I did as much as I could. I have not recouped the $15,000 I've lost during that endeavor. Since I've cleaned it all up, I've put it back on Airbnb, and I'm getting a lot of responses from local families, communities, businesses, and even my neighbors are requiring my services of accommodating their families for funerals, for weddings, for reunions. I've hosted homeless families that are in between houses. I've hosted work crews that are installing solar panels on different industries in the area. I've hosted corporate guests for conferences for Allen Insurance. One family, my first guest at Airbnb, they've used my place for 2 funerals and 1 wedding so far, and I'm sure there's more on the way. Anyways, happily, since opening, I just said all that, sorry. Happily, since opening my whole house, I have had the pleasure of providing accommodation, many feelings, families, weddings, reunions, all that stuff, all necessary elements of a prosperous town. That's very important to understand here. We want to make this town prosperous. We don't want to run it into the ground. With the idea of banning all short-term accommodations, STAs, in the area, are there any consultations and or contracts being tendered to replace the current number of privately funded and operated STAs with commercial hotel or motel chains? Do you guys are you doing that kind of thing? Like looking towards how you're going to create more accommodation for these short-term accommodations that are being wiped out, dismantled? Apparently not. Okay, so if you're not doing that, how likely would you be able to attract new residents to an area that does not have adequate affordable accommodation, which, by the way, also limits medical services and local labor pool? So now we're losing medical staff, and we're losing more people to the labor pool, and we can't have our families come because there's no short-term accommodations. Oh well. If larger local cities such as Belleville and Kingston have adopted a future plan of allowing STAs, including whole home STA locations where the homeowners are not required to be on the premises, why is it that the council has seemingly chosen to not adopt similar regulations? Both of these cities have hotels and motels, so competition is not at issue here. Has the council decided it would be more prudent to dismantle what has been successfully built up over many years by private citizens to fill a void that accommodates local family functions like weddings, funerals, reunions, community events like the Maple Syrup Festival, and more importantly, medical staff, which rely on accommodations close to the medical facilities like the Campbellford Hospital to keep those facilities open to all the local area? Does anybody remember how many times the emergency section at the Campbellford Hospital had to shut down because they didn't have enough medical staff? Do you know why that is? Because the doctors have nowhere to stay. The nurses have nowhere to stay. Do we know how close the Warkworth place has almost closed its doors because there's not enough accommodation for the medical staff there? I happened to be in consultation last week with one of the coordinators, and they were looking desperately to find accommodation for medical staff. They have 12 rotating nurses. They had to provide their own because there's no other. And the town council is not providing anything, province isn't providing anything, federal government's not providing anything. So they're going out on their own. Just like the hospital is providing accommodation for medical staff at the new hospital. They see the future. They know what has to be done. They're doing it. It's not here yet, unfortunately, and our medical services are dwindling. Are we going to be able to attract new residences when we don't even have a hospital that can stay open because we don't have enough accommodation for medical staff? I don't think that's going to be very helpful. In the email from Stephanie Lundy, which is in the, on the website, who wrote a great letter full of very valid points, the third paragraph states, and this is quote, "Fortunately," this is in regards to Airbnb that was right next to her and was problematic. And she complained and complained and complained, okay? This is the third paragraph. "Fortunately, after multiple years of enduring endless issues," and I'm sure you know this, "the owner of the property was issued a cease and desist notice from the staff of the municipality. We are very pleased to report that after the notice was issued, the owner ceased operating the property as an Airbnb." The key point here is multiple years. Multiple years. That's a long time. It's more than 1 year, probably more than 2 years, probably 3 or 4 years. It took multiple years for the municipality to address the frustrating situation that was solved by only one piece of paper. One piece of paper, a cease and desist order. Problem solved. Doesn't seem that hard, does it? If there's a problem, they get complaints. As I talked before with some of the other people here, 3 streaks, you're out. So if you have a permitted situation and you have the addresses and you know the owners and you file a complaint against them, guess what? Problem solved. One cease and desist letter and it's solved. From my personal experience, which is over 40 years, the Landlord-Tenant Act is a long-term problem. So yeah, sure, you want permanent residents. Guess what? They have a 5-year lease. Guess what? They're terrible tenants. They destroy the property, and guess what? You can't get rid of them. You're stuck with it because of the Landlord-Tenant Act. With short-term accommodations, it's a very temporary problem. And that problem can be resolved through Airbnb because they have an insurance policy to help with that situation, and they have a grading system to weed out the problem people. Okay, the last part is, While other municipalities have chosen to look towards the future, Belleville, Kingston, and address those challenges, this municipality seems to want to avoid the future and to dismantle the years of successful accommodation created by local private residents, who offer short-term accommodations in this area, which has no hotels and only one motel. Like as we said before, where is anyone going to visit and stay? In the federal, I think council would do well to look at the situation with a more 360-degree view, focusing on what makes this area more attractive and accessible than just adding a few more housing to the housing supply. If the federal, provincial, and municipal governments were truly interested in creating more affordable housing for people, they would be building mixed housing with affordable apartments for the new immigrants, students, young adults, retirees, professionals, and all those who do not want or need to buy a $500,000 home, contributing to urban sprawl. So what are we going to do? Are we going to just close our eyes and just hope that it's not going to happen here? Too bad, it already is. You have to deal with it. So we really need to come up with a proper situation where we can have licenses, permits, fines, and if you have to have a transient inspector that goes around from place to place every year, he does Kingston, does Belleville, does Cobourg, just like the health inspector does, then that's what you need to develop. You need to develop a short-term accommodation inspector. I hope this has shed some different kind of light from my perspective many years, and I hope it can change the decision to wipe out what's already there, because you're not going to build it, and somebody else already has. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. This, and having everyone speak is exactly why we have these meetings, so thanks for stepping up and speaking to that. Anyone else that would like to speak for or again, or not, just like to speak? Yep, come on up. Oh, you come on up, yep. And then we'll go to you there. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Marshall, and I live in Trent Hills, I live in Hastings. I do support this because I think that I have lived in this area for about 8 years. I volunteer in this area. I work in this area, and what I can see from all of the meetings that I have attended or watched online, we are not Belleville, we are not Toronto, we are not big. We are growing, but we're not there yet. What we're doing right now is not working. I can tell you that we have had complaints about different things in our area that I have reached out to enforcement. I'm still waiting to hear. We don't have the staff that can accommodate the issues that's taking place with STAs right now. In terms of tourism, there is nothing better than having the owner on site. I can tell you, anyone that comes to our STA, I'm there. They want to know where to go. It's not a pamphlet that they're reading. They're coming to me. I have toured people around numerous places in Trent Hills. That's a one-on-one. You will never have an enforcement issue with our STA because we are on site. We deal with it and it's dealt with. I think a big thing in this that needs to be addressed, it's not black and white, as council knows, as the municipal staff knows. There's always changes that can be made. There's always amendments that can be made. There's variances that people can bring forward. If you live beside a home and you rent out another one, you're right there. I understand what people are saying in this, but we can have amendments. You can come forward as a homeowner and say, look, I shouldn't have to be in this block because I really fit here. I'm still local, I'm still in the area. On a one-on-one basis, it can be looked at. What we're doing right now is not working. And I don't want my taxes to increase any more than they already have. And I feel that if we have the motion that's going forward where we are going to just let everything take place the way it is right now, we can't enforce it. We don't have the staff. I commend the staff right now because the amount of work that's taken place up until this point is absolutely unbelievable. And I commend what they've come up with in multiple forums. I've been involved in this from the beginning. I want nothing more than to be part of the Chamber of Commerce. I want nothing more than to have things take place in the community, but I am a homeowner that's on site. I do think that that makes a huge difference. And I support the way that this draft bylaw is being written, I am in full support of it. Thank you very much. I don't expect claps.
Thank you, Jennifer, for your comments. And we have a lady right behind.
I'm not a great public speaker. I'm a very nervous speaker, so
That's
bear
okay.
with me. Diane Sturley, and I'm at 295 Concession 2 Road West. I have a straw bale bunkie on our property, so it's kind of a very different kind of structure. We are on Airbnb, and it's not a structure that you can make into a long-term stay. It's a short-term stay. It's not winterized. We have a electric heater in there, so you can make it a comfortable environment for most of the months throughout the year. We've hosted, same as what Lizzie was saying, people that have come to the community to attend classes. I live on the same road as the Branch Ranch, so people, a single person comes in, the next day they want to go to a class. People have come and stayed with us because they want to see what's a straw bale bunkie. It's an option for living as well, right? Sustainable living. So, and then they might go to a class and be a part of a course on how to build those kind of structures. We've hosted grandparents attending their kids' weddings in town. It goes on and on, mothers and daughters, sons and their fathers attending different classes or just visiting. Our first couple that stayed with us were a mother and daughter from Sweden. So what a great experience for me too, to have someone that comes and stays in Warkworth and just experiencing what we have to offer. I mean, it's so beautiful in our area. Who would want to stay in a hotel? Why would you want to stay in a hotel for a night when we have these beautiful homes, very extraordinary built spaces? You have Sandy Flats that has their amazing little bunkie there too. You're right in the woods. Lizzie's Place. So you have just a variety of options and choices, and really an incentive to go out and explore and see what does our area have to offer us. Can we have a new business here? Can we expand? Is it worth it to us to live here, to settle here, with a lot of new young families coming into this area too, young entrepreneurs, artists, writers. We've all had those at our short-term stays, people that just want to feel what it's like to be here. So I think even the option of building hotels, I think we still need other kinds of options for short-term stays, but I don't think you can take away these short-term stay places. We don't have an option to make it a long-term stay, so we would just not be operating. We wouldn't have that experience for someone. And other places, and I totally agree with Trevor. I worked with a property management company for years, and I can tell you that the residential buildings that they're dealing with right now, since COVID, they are waiting 5 years to get to court. So you can imagine what those building property owners are owed right now for those apartment units. You're talking tens of thousands of dollars right now, and that won't get to court till, who knows. And if it's resolved, they probably won't even get that money back anyway. So there's a lot of things I think to discuss here. It's not a simple solution, and I empathize with you when you have to deal with those situations, because I think everybody's had maybe a situation where you have a bad neighbor, or in that situation, maybe a bad neighbor every weekend sometimes. But I don't think everybody's like that with their long-term stays. Maybe it's new bylaws, new things, or new restrictions that can deal with these people. And I agree, 5 years is way too long to deal with a problem. How many of us I think as homeowners, sometimes we're probably acted upon much quicker than someone who makes a complaint and can't just live in peace on their own property. So why not have, we have to deal with the bad apples that are making people's lives miserable, and still give people the opportunity to show people how beautiful it is in Trent Hills. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to look towards my online. I haven't seen any hands, but perhaps if you want to speak, turn your video on and I will be able to see. Just, I don't want to leave anyone out. And I don't see anyone turning on. They're joining us. Oh, we got a couple here. Jeff, I see you there. If you want to turn your mic on and you can go ahead. Just speak your name and your address there, please, Jeff.
Great, thank you. Yeah, my name's Jeff Collard. I have a cottage at 40 Westview Road, Hastings. I live in Kitchener. But I just did want to just kind of shed light on the whole, landlord that doesn't live in Trent Hills stereotype. I'm somebody that has Campbellford in my blood. I've been going there my whole life, and it is very near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love Trent Hills. And so just because I do not live there doesn't mean, it would fit the typical stereotype of an absentee landlord that doesn't care about the property or who's staying there or my cottage neighbors. I've had a cottage, 40 Westview Road, for about 3 years now. Just over 120 guests have come in there in that time. When I purchased the property, it was almost a tear down. We saved it. We've spent thousands of dollars fixing it up. It is now looking fantastic and in great shape. And of those 120, you can go on my Airbnb listing and you can see they're fantastic families that bring their kids, and they discover Trent Hills, and they love the area. They're respectful. My cottage neighbors have had nothing but good things to say. It's been an incredibly positive experience in every way, shape, and form. And this has been my first endeavor into renting anything out like this. And it's just been an absolutely wonderful experience. And what has been great has also been just knowing that I've been contributing to the Trent Hills economy, to the Trent Hills community. My grandparents lived in Campbellford. My sister lives in Campbellford. My father had a property in Campbellford. It is like a second home to me. And so that's very important to me, that aspect of it. And just the thought that I would not be able to do this anymore actually really breaks my heart. I have to say that. It's not only would it be something that would be very difficult for me to think that these people could not experience this place that I love so much, but it would also make it extremely difficult for me to keep the place. And let's be straight up. This place is not going to be a long-term rental. It is a cottage on the Trent River. Most of the places on our private road, which does not have snow plowing, they are 3-season cottages, and nobody is long-term going to be renting it out long-term. And again, as I've said, they've had over 120 renters, and we have had one renter out of all of those throw a party. It was for a weekend, and like the one of the previous people said, it was very easy to deal with because they were gone the next day. Unlike a long-term rental that might not be abiding by all the laws and whatnot. And so I'm just very confused. This whole proposal has really upset me and really quite shocked me because I thought I was actually doing a really good thing for the community. And now I feel very much like a bit of a black sheep here, like maybe like go back to Kitchener and sell your place and let's just have that be a cottage that is used maybe 100 days out of the year by the cottage owner, as opposed to 200 days out of the year by people bringing in their vacation dollars and bringing their kids to enjoy the community. To me, it's a no-brainer. I really, really, really hope that you all take the time to really seriously reconsider the suggestion that we would ban these short-term rentals. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks for your comments, Jeff. Tracy, did you want to unmute there and just name and your address and then go ahead?
Hi, everyone. Tracy Reed Bowes and Rodney Bowes at 88 and 92 Front Street North here in Campbellford. We've been operating an Airbnb for a number of years here, and I have to say I'm a little surprised at just the blatant lack of, how do I say, just the blanket statement of banning them particularly. I mean, I really do feel that in some cases there ought to be exceptions. For instance, we're in a position where on one lot in Campbellford here, but we have two houses, part 1 and part 2. So that exempts us technically from what the bylaw currently reads. And I think that really needs to, and like other places like Emilyville, for instance, who had submitted a letter, there has to be some exemptions in some cases. I just don't see any way around that. I mean, otherwise you're forcing people to sell their homes, and it's too expensive a home for anybody to come in. And we have lived with long-term renters as well. And like another fellow said in Warkworth, the place was trashed, and we don't want to have to go through that again. Rodney, would you like to say a word?
No, I think that what Nancy said was I'm Rodney Bose, by the way. Sorry. What Nancy said, I think, was spot on. I think what a lot of people have said is spot on. I do not agree that this is taking away from any low income or housing that we need. I mean, if we sold our house, it would be $750,000. That's not exactly low income housing for me. I couldn't afford to buy it at this point. We bring in probably about 200 people a year. We've had nothing but 5-star reviews. People love this town. We've had 2 houses sell in Campbellford because of because we brought them in as guests, and they've fallen in love with the town and then bought houses, and they were looking for places to retire, but they stayed here. And also, when you kind of do the math on all this, you figure that if we have 200 guests, that means 200 people come, so let's say they come for 2 nights each. That means that they are probably going to go out for dinner, 400 dinners then out at restaurants. We go out maybe once a month. So, somebody living there full time is probably going to, maybe go out 20 times in a year and spend money like that. They don't come up with their groceries and stuff because they don't really know what they're getting when they come up, how equipped the kitchen is, blah, blah, blah. So they'll go to Sharps, which is great. We let them know right away, that Sharps is right across the street from us. And so none of that kind of makes any sense. We are owner adjacent in that we are on the same lot, but we are next door technically, right? So technically we would not comply with the bylaw, which says of the house. Yeah. And if anybody made any noise at all and anybody plays music down by the river at night, we go down and tell them, no, don't do that because noise travels. Our parking situation, we never allow, Sharps has let us use a spot in their corner. If we have any overflow, that's more than 1 car because we can only accommodate 1 car. We never let them park on the street, take up any parking spots. Our neighbors, we've had letters, 2 houses on one side, 2 houses down from us, all commending how great it's been. They've never had a problem. So we never had a single noise complaint. We owned the house up on the hill for many years. We had 3 sets of tenants there. We had the police show up there maybe 6 times. We'd have neighbors phone us in the middle of the night, say, you've got to come up here. Your tenants are out of control. These are full-time tenants. We tried to make it affordable. Thus, we got a really, I hate to say it, but we got a very low common denominator person living there, staying, renting from us. We're charging $190 a night, which is the same as the motels, for a full house kitchen. We have a huge art gallery downstairs. We could have divided it up into 4 bedrooms. We have 2 bedrooms only. We only allow 4 people to come and stay. And we kind of feel like there needs to be some thought behind this, not just this kind of arbitrary, well, this is terrible, we don't like strangers in town. There's been some noise complaints. As the gentleman said earlier, whose name I can't remember, if there's a noise complaint, then let's deal with it. Let's send somebody a citation. Anyhow, there's many ways. We've sent an extensive letter to the planning committee, and thank you for your time.
And just lastly, we too, as the gentleman said, or the gal at Lucky Stars have mentioned, we also house nurses and
Oh, yeah.
doctors, the locum doctors that come through here that work at either Warkworth or here in Trent Hills.
Yeah, we had
And-
nurses for 4 months last
year.
last winter, 4 months for the hospital.
And in part, that's our way of giving back to the community. So that's it.
Oh yeah, and we charge. I think the hospital can only afford $120 a night, and that's what we end up giving it to them at. So,
It's
thank
not
you.
not a moneymaker, but we enjoy doing it, and we'd really like to see it stay.
Thank you
to everyone. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Tracy and Rodney. And I mean, a lot of the points that are being made, some may fit under the exemptions that planning have talked about. So let's keep working. You know, this isn't, as some may have thought, this is sort of an end deal. It's not. This is why we're here. Let's talk about this. Let's see where our end result is going to be. Another guest back here, if you want to come up to the microphone. Yep. Let's, if there's new information, we'd like to definitely hear some new information. We get the general concept. So bring us some new information, and just your name and your address, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julia, and this is
Alexander.
Alex.
Hello.
We actually bought a house in Camberford before we heard the name of Camberford in March 2020, just at the beginning of the pandemic. We skipped from Toronto. We didn't even look at the house. We just bought it just because of the pandemic was so bad, and I brought my whole family over. And the second day, we just fell in love with this town. It made this escaping, actually, it's supposed to be stressful time, made it so beautiful, because not only the scenery is so beautiful, but also the people here are so nice. You say hello to everybody on the street. And I still have this habit, even though after the pandemic, I moved back to Toronto because the working at home option is over, right? I have to go back, unfortunately. But I brought this habit of say hello to people on the street because of this beautiful city, the town of Camberford. Because of we have to move back to Toronto, our home in Camberford is weakened now. Like the gentleman who were talking about renovate the house, we did renovate. We put like $500,000 in our house. The house was like was built in 1850, so it's an old house. And so we put $500,000 there. And myself, I am an interior designer, so I've made the house very beautiful. And I'm thinking what to do with it. Of course, the last option for me is to rent it out to long-term tenants because of the Landlord-Tenants Act. I think I'm still very traumatized by that. I came to Canada with $20 in my pocket, and I worked 4-5 jobs, and I worked this far, and I just hate to see the house that I built were trashed by the long-term tenants, and you are powerless to kick them out. And I really don't like it. So I'm thinking about options. So one option actually attract my eyes is the short-term rental. So I was doing some research. I also tried Airbnb in Belleville, which actually is my friend who's hosting it. And I asked them a few questions about how did you get the license and whatever. And she told me that the township in Belleville is very, very supportive. And they guide you from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 until the day they gave you the permit. And it involves the fire officers and the bylaw officers, and they came to the property and check and guide them over. And also they gave a very specific instructions about the noise complaining and everything. So, and the Airbnb in, the short-term rental in Belleville, actually, it brought a lot of new guests and also boosted the economy of the local people. So I think it's a very positive thing, and I am seriously thinking about it. Especially I'm reading this come for visit and stay for a lifestyle. And I think I just came for the pandemic. However, after the retirement, I will move back to Camberford because I feel I can live here for good. It's a great town. And plus, the scenery, the suspension bridge, doesn't only belong to Camberford. I think it should be shared by the whole Ontario, by the whole Canada. When I was staying there, and a friend of mine from France, they came from Lyon. They just loved the suspension bridge. And it probably belonged to the whole world. And I look around, I think we need more diversity, right? From all over, people from all over the world. It's not about a yes or no. It's not about what we should do. It's about how to make it happen, how to help to make it happen. And I was listening carefully. I think there's 3 concerns so far. The first one is the noise concern, and I totally understand that. I did rent out my property before, and like what the gentleman said, like 10 times broke the record. They called the police because of my long-term tenants. So it doesn't mean you have a long-term tenants, you'll be having a very nice and quiet place to stay. What we need to do is not just to stop doing this, but also I think we need to have a more regulation about the noise control. Very simple. You probably have like 100 guests, maybe just 1 complaint, or maybe less than that. Because my friend in Belleville told me that pretty much 99.9% of the guests are very well behaved. And they are very educated and have very civilized, and that really make me feel more comfortable, have more confidence in this. So that's the first complaint. First concern is the noise, and second, the concern is the housing. And I think housing, for me, I have the house vacant now. If you give me like $5,000, I wouldn't rent it out long term because I'm worried about the landlord tenants board, how they behave. I don't like that. So it's nothing to do with the housing. If it's short of housing, I think it's better to build some apartment buildings and stuff. And along the river, it will be so beautiful. People would love that, and also affordable. So that's the second point. It's about the housing shortage. And the third concern is if we're ready or not, if Camberford Township is ready or not for this. I think this is so simple. You ask any woman who sit here, who's a mother, are you ready to be a mother when you find out that you're pregnant? Nobody's ready. Right? But you get along, you go along with it, and you become a great mother, right? So, and also in Belleville, I think there's a few percentage, 3% of the tax you pay for the 4%, the tax you pay for each staying, and that tax will go to the township, and the township not only losing money, have to hire people, but also they make profit. The township make profit, and all the stores on the street make the profit. And also, a lot of my friends come over here. They drove 100 miles just to try the Antonio Bistro the Dockside Bistro, right? And we support the local business. Imagine the whole summer without this short-term rental, you walk on the street of Campbellford, who you looking at, who you bump into, your neighbor, not likely, but will be a very quiet town. If a town like this, so beautiful, we close our mind, if everybody closes our mind, not welcoming, I wouldn't be here. I just want to take this chance to thank you for opening your arms, welcome me. And by the way, if we all close our arms, not welcoming, and this whole country, Canada right now, only the Aboriginal people who lives here. But here we are, right? So I think it's not about a yes or no or what we do, it's about how to make it happen, how to make it happen better. So I drove today from Toronto just to actually appreciate, to express my appreciation. And I really love this town, and I hope more people can share this town with me and with everybody here. So thank you so much.
Just a few comments on top of what you so graciously mentioned, but having gone through the landlord-tenant board with egregious offenders, if anyone needs any counsel on how to get through that or get rid of some bad tenants, let us know. We've lost thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, and that's really left a sour taste in our mouth and actually some trauma, financial and emotional. And also, I think, you have large groups of people looking to come here. Where can they stay? Where can they stay together? Do they want to stay in a house where there's another person where the owner is present? I think most of them would prefer the privacy. They can always get in touch. We can be over the phone, video. A lot of people don't want to contact owners for STAs. They just want to go enjoy their time with their family and move on. So I think you're missing out on a lot of bookings if you do not allow for a whole home to be rented as short-term accommodation, because people are looking for those types of opportunities. And a lot of people won't book if there's an owner present in the dwelling. I mean, you've got some stranger living in a bedroom down the hall from you. And sure, I commend this lady for being such a great advocate and ambassador for the town and giving tours. I think that's very valuable, especially where it's requested and appreciated. And I'm sure everyone would be grateful for that ambassadorship. In instances, say for example in Belleville, where the owner is not living in the premises, they have to designate someone that lives within a half hour so they can respond in a timely fashion to any exigent circumstances, noise or pipes bursting or whatnot. So if you're a distance landlord, these are problems you have to deal with regardless of STA or a tenant or an empty dwelling. So, I'm in real estate. There are a lot of factors at play. I think the landlord-tenant board is a huge problem that's I don't know what's going to fix it, but it certainly is keeping a lot of homes empty, a lot of people afraid from renting, and for good reason. You work really hard on something, and then someone decides to not pay rent and do hard drugs instead. The only way we got rid of them is to call the Ontario Ombudsman and basically have them forced to pay their ODSP to us directly. And as soon as their cash flow dried up, they skedaddled. So there's a really imbalanced system here. And I think throwing the baby out with the bathwater and getting rid of whole home STAs, I don't see a lot of wisdom in it, but that's why they don't pay me the big bucks, I guess.
Thank you. Once again, it's not about yes or no or what we do, it's about how. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I've got one more, so I'm going to come back to council after. Thank you, Julie and Alex. I do have an individual online right now, so Peter, if you want to turn your video on, and I saw a hand over in the corner of my eye over here as well. So let's bring some new information. I know everyone's very deeply connected to what they have, and we do know that. But in concern of time, let's bring some new information and some of your concerns. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, it's not Peter, it's his wife. So my name is Maria Webby, and we have a property at 1033 County Road 38 in Campbellford. And we've had that property for roughly 20 years. It is our cottage property that we purchased, and with the intent to retire in Campbellford. And throughout those years, we had done major renovations on the property. It has separate cabins, and the whole place was completely dilapidated, and we renovated everything. Eventually, we rented out long-term the main house. And within a 10-month period, those tenants completely destroyed the home. It brought us to tears after working on it for so many years. And like I say, intended to retire there. And when we heard these proposed bylaws, we were completely disheartened, at the thought that now STAs, whole home STAs specifically, would be possibly taken away. For us, we've had the property rented for about 3 years now. Once those tenants left, it cost us thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to renovate the place again. We had to strip it down, every single baseboard, every piece of flooring. It went right down to the subfloor. We had to take everything out. All furniture was tossed, everything. Washer, dryer, fridge, stove, everything. And that was a terrible experience, and we got nothing back from that. And we rented to those people because they had a handicapped child, and the mother was handicapped, and they needed a one-level home because the child didn't walk and would be on the floor. And, that is why we rented to them, to try to help that family. And they totally destroyed everything we built. So our experience with the STAs has been amazing. We've rented it out for the last 3 years, both the main house and the cabin, and we have never had a complaint. We get our fire permits every year. We set out the rules. It's all written out on our Airbnb, the time for lighting the fire pit and when you have to put it out. We do not allow for parties. We've had families rent the whole property. It is 7 acres, and we've never had complaints from our neighbors. We actually employ one of our neighbors for snow removal and lawn care throughout the whole year. We hire cleaners in the area to clean out the Airbnb after every guest. So, and we've brought that to Campbellford as well. So for us, having the STA taken away is, we live in Bradford. We're 2 hours away. My husband deals with all our guests through text and phone calls. He responds immediately, and we've had great reviews, as we're super hosts. And one time when one of our guests locked themselves out of the cottage, we literally had driven from Campbellford because we were cleaning it that weekend, and we got home and they called us. They didn't have a key to get back in. My husband drove back, and that was a 2-hour drive. So we don't live on the property, but we make sure that our tenants have everything they need. We respond to anything they call about, and we do everything we can to make sure that they have that without being within the vicinity. So we would ask that you really take into consideration that not being a property owner that lives on site is not necessarily something to be excluded from on STAs, because we have built that property for 20 years, refaced it completely, and we do everything we can to maintain it and to make sure that our guests get their best value for their money and that they are happy once they leave their stay. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. I just wanted to let you know that, homeowners who do not live on the property still are 100% invested in caring for the property, maintaining the property, and making sure that the guests have a great experience and want to return to Campbellford. And we've had so many people tell us they're coming back and have come back or have, referred other family members or friends. We have many people that actually come from Ottawa and Quebec and stay. So that's all I really wanted to say. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And I'll pass that back to the speaker.
Thank you for your comments, Maria. Well taken. And Chris, if you want to take the podium, just go the name and address, please.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thank you guys for showing up. Chris Clark, my wife and I own Sandy Flat Sugarbush, 500 Concession Road 3 West in Warkworth. I didn't realize till Nancy said it that my wife and I occupy the #1 and #2 top earning spaces for the municipality of Trent Hills. We're farmers and we're tourism. Without tourism, we would not be able to do what we do at Sandy Flats. We would shut it down 100% if we are too small of a commercial maple syrup operation to make a go of selling just syrup, because I would have to bulk sell it or sell it wholesale. Having that tourism, having 25,000 people come down my driveway every year allows my wife and I to make that our lifestyle. Allows us to give 60+ school tours a year, educate our public, educate our children. What I don't think you guys realize is short-term rentals and what a valuable thing that plays for Trent Hills. I'll give you one quick example. We've been here long enough. We had a young couple from Germany come down in June. We got a call from that Airbnb host saying, I have 2 young girls from Germany here. They want to see a maple syrup operation. I said, I'm at the Sugar Bush, send them down. They came down. Those 2 people from Germany left our driveway, drove up the driveway, put a post on the travel site they use in Germany, and less than a month later, we had 4 more people from Germany passing through, stopping at Trent Hills. Why? Because somebody at a short-term rental said, oh, you want to know about maple syrup? They're a maple syrup destination. We have more people from short-term rentals show up. I feel that we would be gravely amiss if we shut down our short-term rentals in the Trent Hills area without a viable short-term rental in place. A hotel, a motel, there's none in Warkworth. I don't believe there's a motel in Hastings, is there? Is there one in Campbellford? We have one. Housing how many people? So 25,000 people come to us. Many of them are coming back for repeat visits in the subsequent months that come. We have many come down our driveway, allowing me to make my sole living off of selling my maple syrup to my consumer directly, not allowing me to wholesale it, put it in a drum, and ship it away. When that happens, Sandy Flats no longer exists. We will not have school tours. We will not have a maple syrup festival. It will not be a viable income for me. It will leave us in the place of selling or changing it to a wholesale, and I'll get a job somewhere else working outside of the township. So without a viable replacement, I think we would be really egregious to be shutting this down. I believe that we have We are putting the cart well before the horse, to quote George Potter. It shouldn't be thought of, and it shouldn't be done until we have a viable replacement in place. We have laws and we have bylaws in place now to handle the bad actors. My question is, why aren't we doing it? And why aren't we downloading those charges of whatever it costs to send out our bylaw officer or call the OPP? They charge us for their time. It's about time that we start downloading that to the bad actors, and you will find that those short-term rental people, when they get a bill for $1,100 for a visit from the police that this young lady has to put up with next door to her, when the owner of that building gets that kind of a bill once a week, he's not going to rent out. Stop worrying about policing the people that are doing a good job, and let's police the people that are doing a bad job. That's what laws are supposed to do. They're not supposed to police all of us. Anyways, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Is it new?
It is new. It's actually new, current information.
Very, very quick, Trevor. You definitely had your time, so very, very quick.
It'll be very quick.
And I'm asking council to be lenient here on this.
Thank you very much. I recently sold my parents' house in Belleville. On that house, there was 16 houses. So we're talking about accommodation. Sorry? On the street. On that street, there was 16 houses. How many people were accommodated in those 16 houses on a small street of 16 houses? Rick actually said two per house, which would make 32 people. Actually, it wasn't. It was 24 people. Although most of them were retirees, single people living in 4-bedroom homes. So that's what's going to happen with closing down the STAs. It's just going to end up being 1 or 2 people living in a 4-bedroom house. My friend in BC, he has the same problem with his father. His father needs to go to a home, can't afford a home. He lives in a huge house. He can't afford to live in the house. There's no affordable accommodation for retired people. So we need to build more affordable accommodation. Forget about all this Airbnb stuff. That's great for the tourism. Otherwise, we need apartments. We need affordable accommodation. If the council can't provide it for the local areas, STAs have to provide it. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. Last call. Yep, if you want to come up for some new information.
I wasn't planning on speaking, so I have nothing planned.
No problem. Just name and
Christine Quinn at 52 Millers Lane, Hastings. Millers Lane is a very small, quiet, privately owned road. There's only 6 homes in there. The people that are in there are all from the city, and the reason why they bought where they bought is because it's very quiet. We're on the water, very peaceful. People bought next door. It's a 4-bedroom, high-end home. Since the federal government announced that they need more homes, they're being consumed with these Airbnbs, they changed their website from a lake house to a cottage. It's not a cottage. This is a very high-end home. 4 carloads of people come about every 2 to 3 days. They're on holidays. They're all excited. They're loud. There's a playground in the backyard, waterfront. The Airbnb provides games. So they're playing games. They're cheering. They're hooting. They're hollering. And it's nonstop. We could not sit outside at all last summer because of the noise level. The only time we could sit outside was when housekeeping was there, cleaning up. Housekeeping wouldn't even be gone, and the next group were sitting there waiting to come in. We're farmers, which I don't need to explain to anyone is 24/7 job. Sometimes we're up through the middle of the night with whatever issue. And we've got people next door making noise. I've called the police. The police have said, we're swamped. There's no way we can get to you. You're gonna have to deal with it on your own. So if I can't call police, I can't call you. It could be in the middle of a weekend, Tuesday at Saturday afternoon, or 4 o'clock in the morning. Who's going to enforce these laws? I mean, what's our rights? I've lived here my entire life. We're 4th-generation farmers. We need a de-stressing zone. We work 24/7. When we come home, we want a quiet space. We don't have a quiet space. When you have that many people in one spot next door, they don't even have to have music on. They're all talking at once. The kids are all screaming. They're all out on the water. It's just noise, noise, noise. And when the owners come down, up comes the stereo, the sound, all their friends. It's even worse. So when the homeowners don't even encourage peace and quiet, you know, where do we stand? So my biggest question is, who's going to enforce this? No one's around on the nights, the weekends. The police are busy. These transient places you're talking about, who's going to enforce that? You know, they're going to say, oh, well, we're just on our way through. Well, they're there for a party. So that's my question, is enforcement. And the licensing, if you're going to have licensing. These people are making a fortune what they're charging per night. They're charging per night, per animal. It's unbelievable what they're bringing in. So that's our biggest complaint, is enforcement. And the whole neighborhood is all upset because they're all from the city, and that's why they bought there, was for the peace and quiet, and it's gone. It's a private property. The road's all private property. The Airbnb people come down, the renters. The parents are with kids trespassing, building forts in the woods. They're not supposed to be there. They're in the neighbor's lower swampland. This time of year it's frozen, in there playing on the ice. They're trespassing. They have no respect for anybody else's property. They have no respect for the sound level. I came home from the farm one day and I heard screaming on the water. So I immediately ran out front thinking a child was drowning. There's a little girl, about 8 years old, standing in the water, screaming at the top of her lungs. Her mother was standing beside her, laughing at her, thought it was funny. I don't think they understand how much sound travels on the water. So I stood there and I stared and stared and stared until that mother finally made that child stop screaming. I could go on and on and on with the stories. Where's my rights? We're farmers. We're working 24/7. We need a break. And we need enforcement 24/7 as well. Thank you. But actually, my question is, who's going to enforce it? These noise levels, trespassing, who's going to enforce it in the middle of the night? They're out in backyards with flashlights on. You know, who's going to enforce it?
Yep, it's a good point to make. So I know we're taking a lot of notes and looking at trying to find solutions when we come up to a decision, but that won't be tonight.
Yes, but I definitely
good.
support
Enforcement.
homeowners staying there, not whole home as a party.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. All right. Last, I haven't seen a whole lot of hands. I did see one online, but it kind of went away. It was out of the corner of my eye, so I didn't see who it was. I'll just give a quick moment. I got Tracy and Rodney. Do you have? It would have to be new information to bring because you had time to speak regarding it. So again, as I gave Trevor a tiny bit of leniency, I will give you a tiny bit of leniency to speak again. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I just had a quick point. I can't help myself with this one. Okay, so the last person just said that the owner, when the owners came up, the noise was just unbearable, and the only respite was when it was being cleaned, and basically the STR part, that the Airbnb guests were less noisy. So if you've got a house beside you where people are complete idiots and do that and just make tons of noise and play the boom boxes, because this is the same thing that we have with Tranquility on a Trek right beside us, which is why we bought it, because we realized that if somebody moves in there and all day long they're just playing music full blast down by the river and hooting and hollering right beside us, there's nothing that we can do. You can't call the cops and say, oh, people are making noise next door, and what am I supposed to do? No. Nobody should be able to live in that house because I want peace and quiet. I'm sorry, you just say, well, you're going to have to move, man. Move out into the middle of nowhere where there isn't a neighbor, because that can happen. Or go and be diplomatic and talk to the owner and just say, you know, you're really ruining our lives. But I mean, so that just seemed like kind of a bit of an outrageous statement, and it was said the
Okay,
owners made more noise.
okay, I'm going to stop. We're not here to put down other people's experiences. We're not here. Okay, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go that. It's been very good so far. We're not going to go down that road. Okay.
I beg your pardon. Okay.
I beg your pardon.
Okay, million apologies.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Anyone wants to speak at all?
Can I just respond for 2 seconds? It is actually 2 seconds.
2 seconds, and then I'm going to have you come up very quickly.
Gentleman, he said to go and speak to the owner. We did, and I was physically attacked.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for that experience. Yeah. If you would like to come up and just name and your address, please.
My name is Janine Alexander. I own a home at 2132 7th Line East. In 2020, I got lost in Campbellford, trying to make it back to Toronto. In 2021, I bought my first home here. In 2023.
That was a long time getting lost.
It really was.
Sorry. Sorry.
It really was. But I stayed at a short-term accommodation that night. It just didn't feel like going anywhere. Looked around the city, went to Ferris, ate at Capers, and decided this is where I was going to live. So I bought a home here in 2023. I bought my second home here and started a business in town. My Airbnbs put my second son through university. He's now working and he's about to start a business in town. He's talking to the people at the Dulux, the paint store that just opened, to try to lease that. And our business is seasonal, and in the summertime, we have hundreds of people come through Campbellford hoping to get lost like I did, and they absolutely love it here. I have a friend of mine who just bought a place in Brighton, right off the highway. So, I started out as a guest at a short-term accommodation, and now this is home for me. So I just wanted to share that also.
That's great. Thank you, Janine, for that experience. Any last call? I know I have perhaps council that has a couple quick questions, but one last call for anyone in the gallery or online. Just going to wait a moment because there's sometimes a delay.
Quick something to say.
Yes, Hannah.
My name is Hannah Clark, and I'm part of Sandy Flat Sugarbush, 500 Concession Road West, Warkworth. I can't believe I'm the only one mentioning this tonight because I might be of the younger in the crowd, but I come from a finance background, and I will just say this. There's so many people here tonight who have a small-term or a short-term accommodation, and they rely on this as their retirement fund. And that, I think, alone speaks to, there are a lot of small business owners in Warkworth that I know of, and Trent Hills in general. You retire, you don't have a pension because you've owned a small business. Your retirement is your short-term rental, and that's how you're funding yourself. So I think that when we blanket statement saying we're going to shut down all of the full house ones for sure and put all these high regulations on, like, we're putting these things onto people and now you're going to shut them down. And how are they supposed to make an income in retirement? Then it makes you think, well, I might have to move out of Trent Hills because, let's be honest, it's not always cheap to live in Trent Hills. So you can't retire here necessarily. So I think it's just important. I hope that you guys will take that into consideration that, there are people that rely on these things for income. And I know for us as well, like, we're a seasonal business. In the summer, I have an Airbnb. I'll rely on that for my income. When maple syrup season is over, I don't have 25,000 people coming down in June, July. So just to take that into consideration for you guys.
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you, everyone, for coming out. It's great that we have staff here. You've got council listening, and this is the best public meeting we've had in a long time. And thank you, everyone, for giving your opinions. We're here to listen, and everyone was very respectful of each other, whether your opinion was one way or the other, and that's how we really get things accomplished. So, council, do we have any other questions at all? I don't see any. And Crystal, do you want to have sort of a final wrap-up comment and remind people how to get a hold of you and how it's important to send more information to you?
Sure. Through you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to summarize just for outlining that the process is larger than just today's public meeting. I just wanted to remind council as well that we did hold a public meeting slanted the opposite direction, and we also had a lively conversation of many residents in Trent Hills that had opposite experiences as well, some of which we heard today. So I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of people that live here who aren't in this room currently that have expressed comments in this process, and that, yeah, our job is to try and balance all of these and come up with a balanced approach that allows options for the uses for people who want to do them. Yeah, so our solution in terms of how to look at the void of whole homes that are currently operating is the list of uses that we outlined to council. So we do have, out of the 6 options outlined, 5 of those would still be permitted. One of them is very close to a whole home, which would allow a separate unit on your property that would allow the privacy for someone and function very similarly to a whole home. So those that want to provide additional comments, you can email planning@trenthills.ca. That will provide all of your comments to planning. And anything if you want to provide similar to what you've provided today, or if you wanted to write your contact information and we can record your comments based off of the video that is being recorded, that can be done as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Crystal, for that. And with that, we're going to take a motion of adjournment. Is recommended now. Pardon me? It's recommended. Do you want to stay longer, Rick? It's recommended we do now adjourn at 8:35 p.m. Councillor English, Mayor Crate, and all those in favor? Carried. And again, I thank you everyone for coming, and please reach out if you have dying information you